Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Hey, Adam. I'm doing amazing. I'm doing amazing. It's finally happening. We're doing it.
We're doing a Guardrail podcast. To kick things off, maybe just give us just a quick intro. You're the founder of Guardrail, but tell us about Guardrail and why you started the company.
Guardrail is your go-to security monitoring platform. You're launching an NFT, you're launching a DeFi exchange, you're launching a new L1 or an L2. We're building Guardrail to help you secure that. That's the holy grail of it. Personally, I tried looking for something like Guardrail. It didn't exist, so that's what got me excited about building it. It's been a really, really interesting 2-year plus journey getting to this point where today we have dApps across the entire ecosystem using our product to secure themselves.
From our past conversations, I mean, part of the reason you're building the company is because you have a security background and your parents have a security background, and you could call yourselves maybe a security family. I don't know if there's such a thing, but it's like generations of security expertise. So can you just tell me just a little bit about that for people, who don't know you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting being a security person and in front of a camera and creating content, because as a security professional, you're just so used to working behind the scenes. The quote I like is, when security is working well, you don't want to hear about it. You only hear about it when something's going wrong. So that's kind of been my background. I've been in 250 plus war rooms across multiple different companies, jumping into incidents, code reds, things like that. While it's obviously really important to get that work done behind the scenes, the building, the shipping, the protecting, it's also equally important, I think, to get the messages across to stakeholders you're working with on why you make certain decisions, what needs to get done within the next minute versus what can wait for later. So communication is a pretty tactical skill within security. And then thinking about the uphill battle of securing Web3, securing the future of finance, that's an unsolved problem today. We're watching the TVL of crypto grow every couple of weeks. Are we seeing the same trend with security? It's actually been the inverse trend. For every couple of dollars that we're adding to the TVL of DeFi, we're actually increasing the amount lost to hacks. And that's kind of the core equation that we're trying to go after and solve. But security is something that's very close to my heart. It's one of those really tough problems that you need to first spend months understanding. And then even if you build the best product, attackers are going to spend weeks kind of breaking it, taking it apart, and then sending you back to square one. So it's the most high stakes game of chess you can play in the cyber world.
Yeah, and we've seen that play out this year in particular with the amount that's been sort of lost to exploits. It's been pretty incredible. So it's been a dramatic year on, I think, multiple fronts. But yeah, it's super interesting to me to know just like a bit about your background, and then the fact that you've been working behind the scenes, and now with Guardrail, starting Guardrail and starting to sort of get out in front, and now you're starting to do some more public facing work as well. And I think the interesting thing about that is that I think crypto, typically people do work behind the scenes, but security even more so. So putting a face on the company and letting people see you and hear your ideas, I think is pretty awesome. So something we were sort of chatting about was the current state of security audits and monitoring. And can you give us sort of just like, where's your head at? What are you thinking about? What's top of mind right now when it comes to the space in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Touching a bit upon why we're actually pushing more content out there for security to begin with is that my own personal motivation. I mean, I really want to see the whole world gets more secure. And then considering that we spent the last couple of years in blockchain, I want to see blockchain become more secure. That's kind of my personal mission. And while I think security in general has this connotation of being an IT or a network thing, you just kind of rubber stamp it to get it done. I think we're watching the next generation of security companies flip that narrative in the Web2 world about something like Wiz, which is kind of the cool kid on the block, because they've actually focus on the UX, to focus on making things as automated and as intelligent as possible. That's the new way of doing security. It's not necessarily supporting everything possible with breadth, but it's actually like really just giving the best user experience and ensuring performance above all else. I like that mental model. I think it's important in crypto we bring that mental model and say, rather than just give you security, can we give you the best security possible? Can we make your company present itself almost like a fortress, so that when attackers are looking for the lowest hanging targets, your company's name isn't on that list. So in terms of content, I think there's so much to solve for in terms of tactical tips for security, threat intelligence, because how fast the space moves, and then just being a founder that's building in a space that's in crypto, but not necessarily launching a token, right? We're able to work closely, working with teams that are launching launching TGEs and tokens. So it's a fascinating outlook into the founder journey of going from 0 to 1 and beyond. So yeah, I'm excited to get this content out there and see if it can help other founders or help other builders to be able to kind of secure themselves and launch these kinds of products. The whole idea behind Guardrail came about while I was working at LinkedIn. I had a couple of close friends from my time at Berkeley who had actually come off of a hack themselves or helped to relaunch with security. So coming in just as somebody who wanted to see the space be more secure, I spent some time with them really looking at every resource that they had in their arsenal. And while I was doing that, in the weeds for a couple of weeks, I had a second protocol that was launching that also wanted some help with security. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, let's just set up whatever's available. Let's configure these security tools that are available. To my surprise, I mean, there was little to no tooling. It was all kind of done through these services that would come in and give you, security services, security assessments done for you. And I realized it's a hard problem to solve. Be able to do security really well in the space, it's like a multi-part hard problem to solve. First of all, you need a really reliable, always-on system, right? That's basically like the blockchain. It's fault tolerant, it's reliable and secure to be able to run different kinds of checks on it. And then even if you have the system, you need the threat intelligence to feed into that, which could be a researcher on your team, a researcher on our team. But you'd require somebody to continuously keep up with hacks. And that's the security intelligence. And then this whole system can't just exist in isolation. It needs to adapt with the blockchain itself. So new use cases, new cross-chain interactions, whether it's intent-related things, whether it's the new ERCs, it needs to be able to kind of secure what's coming, not just where it is, because that's what the attackers are looking to. And even if you build a system, it's got the security, it's able to evolve and adapt to blockchain. Can we build it in a way that isn't manually intensive? Today, we're used to using AI tools across our whole stack to be able to save time, whether it's writing code, whether it's doing outbound sales. Can we bring that same ethos of productivity using AI to even the security in the system? So it's a hard problem to solve. We worked with multiple teams that have actually spent a lot of resources trying to build this in-house. And that's really what Guardrail is. We want to make it so that you can offload that whole problem, rely on our security research, build using our system, and regardless of what you want to do in the blockchain space across different use cases, Guardrail's got you covered, essentially.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like an ever-changing and like you said, a hard problem. I think calling it a hard problem is something that encapsulates it pretty well. Lots of different dimensions and lots of time and lots of brain power to constantly, be evolving. And the platform has to keep up and get ahead of things. So I can see definitely why a team would need an external team and solution, like Guardrail's building.
Going back to Adam, your initial question, and I think this is a really interesting one because if you're in the security ecosystem, you're aware of hundreds of tools to do each part of the security lifecycle. Writing secure code, whether it's running different kinds of testing on that code and being able to run, real-time deployment checks. But if you talk to people outside of the blockchain space, outside of the security space, the awareness isn't as high. And because they focus on a different set of challenges to solve right now. They want to focus on increasing user adoption. They want to focus on increasing gas limits. They want to focus on increasing EVL and growth. So the challenge is going to be, how do you find that middle ground where, in a space that's hyper-focused on growth, we also need to kind of get just enough security that we can help teams get the peace of mind and the assurances on security. A quick statistic on this is in 2020, all of crypto's TVL was $1 billion. In 5 years, we've 100x that. Right now, we're at close to 100 billion in TVL. And what was the entire TVL in 2020, we've lost in a single hack this year. Over that, actually, in the Bybit hack, for example. So while we've come really far in bringing liquidity on chain, bringing use cases on chain, the primary mechanism of security, which is audits, I think has done a phenomenal job in addressing the baseline of security. But I think it's also left a lot to be desired for blockchain teams. And that's where we're hoping to fill in the gap.
Yeah, it's like audits are not the end all be all.
They do a fantastic job of educating developers. I think without audits, developers are not necessarily getting the awareness and the tooling to be able to support themselves and bring that security upstream. But if you think about everything that attackers are looking at, wearing that black hat for a couple minutes, you realize that there's so many different points of failure, whether it's the internal team, whether it's the dependencies on the supply chain side or on the contract side, and then even just focusing on the core assets that your contracts are touching. The real challenge is, how do we consolidate the risk perimeter for a protocol, simplifying what they need to do for security, and then giving them that peace of mind to be able to really focus on the highest level of design and then having some of the lower level complexity in data fetching and security runbooks, all of that kind of managed for them.
Yeah, and I would think that crypto and DeFi in particular we're years and years into this industry now, but it's still not that late in the game. Eventually, if we want the whole world transacting digitally, security, if there's exploits all the time, massive exploits, it's going to undermine how people perceive the space, right? And individually, I think it could be catastrophic, to lose a bunch of TVL to an exploit. While that can destroy a project before it even gets a chance to grow very big. So shifting gears just a little bit, you came from a Web2 background, you moved into crypto and DeFi. Security's been a theme all the time. Any stories, any lessons from your time in the trenches so far?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just been really fascinating watching the whole space develop. I'm thinking back to my first exposure to crypto, actually. So we can start there. When I was growing up in India, I remember the Bitcoin paper had come out, and the only places that were discussing it at the time was on Reddit r/Bitcoin. That's where some of the action was happening, just kind of dissecting the methodology of censorship and decentralization and things like that. Back then, being a security person, I think I was really interested in watching the ransomware attacks that were actually gaining proliferation in the general threat ecosystem. And the way that these dots connected was there was a platform called Silk Road, which has gotten some more prominence now. But back then, it was a very who's who network because it was only accessible through the Onion routers and Tor browsers. I'm a security person, and I was thinking, okay, there's a whole lot of the internet that isn't indexed by Google, and that's only available through the Onion router. And then when I dug into who was using it and what for, it was all using Silk Road, and that's where crypto was finding a lot of PMF at the time, just with Bitcoin, to be able to kind of fund a lot of legal activities. It was a really interesting time, I would say, pre-Ethereum, because that's where the whole idea of a store of currency that was not trackable was kind of the core use case, right? Nobody was talking about how it's instantaneous. Nobody was talking about how it's immutable. It was mostly the lack of censorship or the cross-borderness that was already kind of the core driver of PMF back then. I think post-Ethereum, we now see the fact that these is now transparent markets with way more support for different asset types, different global operations. And that's why even 10 years later, 14 years later, it's still about stable coins and multi cross-border payments. And I think that's a really cool trend to be able to plot from back in 2012 to now. And I think another kind of really interesting founder lesson has been in being able to adapt our business to an industry that's constantly adapting. So a good example of this is many of our earliest customers were actually making plans around a TGE or making plans around a certain blockchain. But in the time that we work with them, let's say over 12 months, they actually can go from being a single chain protocol to being live on 25 chains, including Rust-based chains, Move-based chains. And the security posture on each of these is very different. Even the data complexity to be able to support them is really, really different. So putting on the business hat, it's a really intriguing challenge to say, what challenges do you accept and what challenges do you kick down the road when you're watching kind of your own customers grappling with a very fast changing ecosystem? Just on the topic of oracles, right? We want to basically make sure that any of our customers that rely on certain oracles can have risk guarantees and monitoring for those oracles. But if you look at the Oracle landscape, that shifted in the last 12 months from push-based to push and pull to a whole host of new names that are getting more market share. And that's happening across every layer of the blockchain stack, from L1s, assets, and oracles. And we want to support all of that, right? We want to make sure that regardless of what you're using, we want to help you secure it. So a lot of mad dashes from a Friday or a Tuesday to ship something for a team. And then a lot of things that we did that will likely never be used again. But we're happy we did it just because we wanted to make sure that one of our customers that deployed on that ecosystem was very, very secure. A lot we can go into there.
It's interesting too, because my impression of the mainstream or legacy financial system, I used to work at an investment bank, and my impression of the systems that they used and that I still hear from time to time is that it's ancient. It's sort of, and this could be inaccurate, but super, super old school programming languages, old ways of doing things. And I guess it's a system that's been around for a long time that hasn't really had to adapt much. Whereas the new system that's being built in DeFi and with blockchain just sounds like what you just described, constantly, like all pieces are evolving all the time. So it sounds fascinating. And also, how do you stay up? You're building a company. How do you stay up to date on what's going on? And Are you staying up to date because customers are asking, they're pushing requests to you and asking for something? How do you stay on top of the cutting edge?
It's a great question. For me, there's so many different frameworks out there, right, that help you prioritize where to spend your attention. At the end of the day, I don't think it's about time. It's about attention for the business, attention for the platform that you're building. While I think there's different frameworks that might bubble up different areas to focus on, whether it's let's say like different layers of the blockchain or different ecosystems. For me, the guiding principle is always thinking about an attacker's POV. And if you're an attacker today, attackers are going by certain principles, right? They want to do the least amount of work to get the most amount of bang for their buck. And if they're successful, they can actually do so much work off chain to be able to test, iterate their exploits. And then once that exploit goes in, they kind of already have their step 2, 3, and 4 planned out. So while I think it's easy to spin your wheels and feel like every part of this ecosystem needs security, which is in one way true. A lot of it, if it doesn't have security for the next couple of months, may be better off than other areas that are actually like the highest growth and the highest at risk. So that's how we have the same mental model within the company is, are we focusing our resources on the most at risk areas of crypto that need the best security? And bringing that into our own platform, are we focusing our time on UX and certain parts that could be a little bit slower versus making sure that any insight that happens on chain is delivered in the most real time aspect as possible? So we do the same kind of 80-20 of prioritizing the importance of having the attacker POV for our customers, but then also as a business too. I think that's how it's very core to our decision making. And that's why we've kind of stayed true to certain ecosystems we support and working with our customers, even on the most kind of custom and advanced use cases, we know that the ones that are most at risk. So we want to make sure that they're covered.
Got it. And so then how do you stay in that state of mind? I mean, you're living in two worlds, right? You're trying to basically see it from the outside as an attacker. And then also, okay, now how do we help our customers play defense, right? How do you jump back and forth?
Yeah, I would say that duality is actually really, if I boil it down, I think all of crypto exists in those two sectors. You're either security, think I'll grow and I'll add security later, growth at all costs, which is one way of thinking. The other school of thinking is right from the first contract that goes out, like let's make sure we have some security in there. And what I've noticed is anybody who's gone through a security incident themselves, whether it's losing some money in a rug pull or losing some kind of money in a failed project, or it's going through a hack, the next time around, you almost always have security baked in. And I can anecdotally look at our customers who launched a V1 and then launched a V2. When we worked with them on their V2 had security controls baked in that they didn't have in the V1. They had pausing, they had admin controls, they had the ability to step in if something were to happen. Because as much as we don't like it in crypto, if we're going to be innovating at the pace that we are, it's helpful to have those controls, and it's helpful to know kind of when to pull that fire alarm. And that's why there's a lot of the blockchain ecosystem that's focused on decentralize everything and focus on the ethos of crypto. And I do think that's where the whole ecosystem has the best chance of succeeding. At the same time, too many people get hung up on finding the most perfect security system. And because they're waiting for the most perfect security system, they cut too many corners. A good example of this is just the fact that regardless of who you are in the space, if you know you're going to be the target of a hack in the next 10 minutes, you're likely to pause your protocol. If I can give you a 99% guarantee that there's going to be a hack coming in within the next 100 blocks, would you, be pro no blockchain changes at all, or would you actually be able to move your funds, pause your protocol, and be prepared for it? And I think every single team that we've had the chance to work with has picked the latter versus kind of choosing to be in line with that.
And do you think that the space has had to become a little bit more mentally flexible about that in order to accommodate making everything more secure? Because I think part of the original idea was that it would be secure out of the box, but we've realized, well, if we're going to build and innovate and create all these products, then really there are lots of ways that people can attack and exploit different protocols. So have people had to sort of update their view of what it means to work in the industry?
I'd say so. I think it just comes with maturing of the entire ecosystem. And I think back to what we've seen with traditional web, right? And I think it's worth reminding ourselves that most of the people who are launching blockchain applications are launching blockchain applications using Web 2 tools. They've grown up in the Web 2 era. So they're actually using things like TCP, AWS to be able to host these applications. They're using the same languages that we're using to build.
I think you said it. You said that they've matured in their viewpoints, because you also have to take in to consideration now how to make things more secure as we build more and more layers. And so I'm wondering if that
Yeah.
conflicts with the original sort of ethos of crypto. And to give, I know this is a long-winded question now, but to give an example, the early days of the web, everyone was saying, oh, information wants to be free and everything should be free and software should be free and all of, and it was a great sort of vibe or movement. But then, people started to realize too, well, we need to be able to charge money for things. Like some things actually do require a lot of time and effort to create. And so I think the attitude evolved. And I'm wondering if people in crypto and DeFi have gone through a similar type of cycle in terms of their thinking.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, the analogy that I like to bring to explain how I view this kind of evolving security stack for crypto is actually more, if you look at the Web 2 world, initially all websites were almost created equal and everything was kind of served through the similar channels of ISPs and internet providers. Over time, we developed security standards like Google Chrome launched a sandbox so that if you're running a browser, the browser can't access your entire file system. That created some security isolation. Then you had certain ISPs that were called bulletproof ISPs that no matter what, you could access anything. And you had other ISPs that would kind of protect you to make sure that you were actually using the internet in safe manner and not necessarily downloading Trojans or getting hijacked browser sessions. And then the final grail was also the fact that we have HTTP and HTTPS. Right? This allows people to kind of opt into secure versions of websites versus not. Now, all of this is so that the protocol itself is the core SSL and the core HTTP protocol is the same, but now it's actually secure alternatives around it so that users can opt into secure designs. I think we're reaching that point now where within crypto, there's enough applications that either give you a DIY, fully do-it-yourself, non-security methods, and then you also have kind of prepackaged security kind of swim lanes that you could go into. So the notion of blockchain itself having some security baked in, I think that notion has been dispelled because unless you're trying to break the node algorithms, it's really easy to be able to have vulnerable applications on the blockchain. And in fact, if you put up a vulnerable application, by the time you spend the couple minutes to go to the block explorer to look at it, someone would have already drained that contract, given how advanced the on-chain investigation community is right now. So from that perspective, I think we're seeing now the shift to the application level security that we've seen in Web 2. And I envision it's only going to improve with the different kinds of applications that we can now create. We're going to see these kind of siloed ecosystems that have different security guarantees, and then also ways to kind of jump between them, between different ecosystems.
So just changing gears again, let's get back to Guardrail. What's your vision for the short term, medium term, long term, whatever term you want to talk about?
Yeah, with Guardrail, I would say in many ways we're just getting started. We've been focused on making the whole blockchain space more secure, and the biggest gap we identified was getting real-time security. And the reason we like that is it gives us this great jumping off point to be able to work directly with builders and not having to rely on kind of user adoption or investor adoption. We go straight to the source of where these applications are being built, give them better tooling so that they can launch with circuit breakers, trust, and security right off the bat. But by starting there, we're actually able to put ourselves fully in the shoes of the people that want better security guarantees. From there, we're already able to deploy this technology with consumers of that technology that's being built. I think investors who are parking their funds in these protocols, users that are kind of hunting for the next application to be able to use. But then there's also use cases like insurance, use cases like incident response that we can actually help facilitate by being in the loop with these builders who are launching different kinds of applications. So our biggest focus in the short and medium term is to just really focus on giving the best confidence and user experience to make security as simple for any of the builders that are out there. So if you're going to be launching anything in the next 6 to 8 months, you want security, we're happy to give you all the attention you need to be able to tailor, customize, give you the best in class security that you can do. And thinking further out from there, we really want to use that as a foundation to make the whole blockchain space more secure. So if anything that would inherit security from the protocol layer is valuable for you too, we're happy to have discussions on that space too, since I think it really does take a village to be able to have security kind of bubble up and be baked in. My thesis is in the next 12 months, right now it feels like security is a part of what a team needs to do to be able to launch. And it still feels like we're on the early side of things. And in the next 12 months, we're going to go to the point where it feels obvious. A single team is going to have their security docs fully, where there's going to be a lot more sophistication in the space.
It'll be interesting to hear, in 12 months, if if you feel like your thesis was correct about where the industry is headed. And hopefully you're right, because if you're right, then that means teams are putting security first. It's top of mind. Everything becomes safer for people. And then if it's safer and there's fewer exploits, across the board, then ideally more and more people are just going to be onboarded and, moving on chain. So, and this has been great. Any final thoughts?
One concluding thought I was going to share is, like I said, we are living in this duality where either you're in growth mode waiting for things to be secure, or you've kind of learned the hard way. And for me, it was actually when I had some money on Mt. Gox and I'd lost that money in Mt. Gox. That was a core eye opener for me, like you said, where it just hits you that even if you do everything right, crypto is not secure by default. It needs that security to be baked in and built. After that, we had the parity hack. We've had multiple different hacks happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem. We're now at the point where today's users have seen hacks of today's protocols. So I think each generation of crypto is witnessing their best used, beloved crypto teams kind of grapple with security. While it's a painful lesson, I think these lessons are actually really helpful for the whole industry to learn that regardless of what you're building, it's not a question of if, but when. And I think it's really important to be prepared with the right tooling so that, like you're not going to be able to be perfect, but it starts off by having different layers of security so that you at least get some deterministic guarantees for what's going to happen. And making yourself not the target of these activities. You want to ideally shift the target off of your back is the best case that you can have in these situations. While I hate that every generation is having to go through these hacks, it's a rite of passage to be able to kind of understand that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And that's why we're happy to do our part to make things as secure as possible.
Awesome. Well, I love the thesis. I love the vision. And it's been awesome talking to you today, and excited to see where you take Guardrail in the next 12 months.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I really enjoyed the session too.